The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Edo Konrad, editor-in-chief of 972 magazine, joins me to discuss the right-wing victories in Israel's elections last week. Meanwhile, health officials warn of a fourth COVID-19 wave as restrictions, including mask mandates in some areas, begin to melt away. Throughout the country, the 7-day rolling average of infections rose for the 7th straight day in a row, a 12% weekly increase. Biden is beginning his pivot to infrastructure with a speech scheduled today in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How about that filibuster reform, though, Joe? In Georgia, civil and voting rights groups have filed a second lawsuit challenging Republicans' restrictive voting laws that were signed into law last week, as calls grow for the PGA Tour to pull out of the upcoming Masters tournament in the state. As the Biden administration extends the eviction moratorium through June 30th, a CBS analysis finds that despite their complaints, landlords have actually been largely profitable during the pandemic, with Invitation Homes, the nation's largest single-family home landlord, recording its most profitable year ever. Here in New York City, a 65-year-old Asian woman was brutally attacked and stomped on in broad daylight in Midtown as the attacker made anti-Asian statements, and the doorman at the luxury building closing the doors as she was beaten in front of them. The Arkansas State Senate has passed a bill which would make gender-affirming healthcare for trans minors, including hormone blockers, illegal. Similar bills are being considered in dozens of other state legislatures, and the ACLU has warned that it is the most extreme threat to trans rights yet. And lastly, the National Bureau of Economic Research report has found that the wealthiest 1% of U.S. residents account for for 1/3 of all unpaid taxes in America. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. As I said before, despite my glasses and the fact that I'm in his seat, I am not Sam Seder, and I'm in for him all week. Very excited to talk to Edo Konrad about Israeli politics. I'm excited to learn even more. It's great to actually just have a conversation with an expert on the topic as opposed to really reading things in bits and pieces myself. But first, I want to talk about the leading story today, which is Derek Chauvin's trial continues in Minneapolis, I believe, in Minnesota. He is the police officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, resulting in George Floyd's death. But his defense is claiming otherwise. They're resting on a few things, that there was fentanyl in George Floyd's system when he passed away, and they're claiming he resisted arrest, which is obvious that he didn't if you watched the video. And now their other claim that the defense is making, the officers, they were so distracted. Chauvin was too distracted to know that he shouldn't have dug his knee with his hands in his pockets into the neck of a man who said, "I can't breathe," 27 times before dying, and continued to kneel on his neck for at least 3 minutes after he was no longer breathing and an officer said, "I can't find a pulse." Let's listen to what his defense has to say, though.
There are people across the street. There are cars stopping, people yelling. There is a growing crowd and what officers perceive to be a threat. They're called names. Heard him this morning. A fucking bum. They're screaming at him, causing the officers to divert their attention from the care of Mr. Floyd to the threat that was growing in front of them.
The care of Mr. Floyd. Curious phrasing. The care of Mr. Floyd. Now, you have to wonder, why were people stopping to watch? Do they stop just because they wanted to see someone arrest somebody else? I mean, there is rubbernecking involved in general, but they stopped because they saw a man dying in front of them. So basically the case is currently being made by Chauvin's defense team that the officer was too distracted by the commotion that he caused by kneeling on a man's neck for over 9 minutes because people were saying, "Stop it, please get off of him. Please don't kill him." And then they're going to turn around and use the effects of the murder in order to excuse the murder. Now, you know, this is, I guess, what every defense attorney has to do. They have to provide the best case for their client, but it doesn't make it any less infuriating. And just an aside, I don't know that attorney's name, but a lot of what lawyers do, and Sam has talked about this a few times, they justify working on behalf of clients in order to say everybody deserves a defense, etc. That's how a lot of corporate attorneys justify representing ExxonMobil or Goldman Sachs or whatever reprehensible company that they choose to take a fat fee from. But how do you actually stomach representing Derek Chauvin in this case? It could not be more clear that the kneeling on the neck of a man resulted in his death. The suffocating of him, the "I can't breathe" 27 times, those were his final words. George Floyd also cried out for his mother and said that his stomach hurt. But his final words were that he was unable to breathe. And then the officer that was helping one of the other 3 officers who were pushing down on George Floyd and making sure he couldn't stand up as he was being suffocated, couldn't find a pulse. Chauvin still knelt on him, still knelt on his neck as the gurney approached a dead George Floyd. Chauvin was still kneeling on his neck.
Chauvin, again, had about a complaint a year for just under 20 years. So you wonder, were crowds involved in all of those too, making him lose his focus? Is this like the PGA Tour where you have to be completely silent as the cop does his work? I mean, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, speaking of the PGA Tour in Georgia, as they pass those horrific anti-voting bills, there's not a rule that you can't make noise when Derek Chauvin's doing his backswing, aka kneeling on a man's neck. So, look, the reason we're covering this is because these kinds of arguments have worked in the past. Many more times, I should say, than the prosecution's arguments have worked when they're going after police officers. Oftentimes because the prosecution doesn't care that much because they're all part of the same team. I'm really hoping that given the severity of what Derek Chauvin did, that this will be an exception to that rule. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Edo Konrad of 972 Magazine will be joining us to talk about Israeli politics.
Folks, whether you're an early bird or you like to hit the snooze button, everybody deserves to sleep in ultimate comfort. And that starts with your comforter. That's why they call it a comforter. Well, Brooklinen can help you get your best sleep. I've talked about Brooklyn for years. I've gone all Brooklinen on all my sheets. What is it called? Bedwear? Bedwear? Brooklinen creates beautiful, high-quality bedding. Oh, bedding and home essentials. There's another word for it, too. I can't remember what it is. But they work directly with manufacturers. They give you a fair price, no middleman, no markups. Their comforters come in 3 different weights. Lightweight, that's mine. All season, I would contemplate. Ultra warm, I'm too hot of a sleeper. But I know there are people who like to be very warm when they sleep. So there it is. Suits every type of sleeper, every type of lifestyle. There's even a weighted comforter for option for stress relief. And those are pretty cool too, actually. They also offer a variety of materials, including eco-friendly recycled down alternative. Brooklinen's comforters pair perfectly with their sheets, pillows, and duvet covers. Look, there's a reason Brooklinen has over 75,000 five-star reviews and counting. My experience with Brooklinen has been amazing. I have gone fully Brooklinenized, as it were, and I have good-looking sheets that are super comfortable. As you know, I go for the clean, crisp version of the sheets. That's the classic, I think they call it. And then they have the more soft, maybe soft is not the right word, the more sort of like, I don't know, soft? I don't know. I like the clean, crisp that keeps me cool. But I love the sheets. I love the comforter. I love the duvet comforter. And frankly, we didn't mention it today, but I also love their towels. Treat yourself to the ultimate comfort with Brooklinen's Comforter Collection. Go to brooklinen.com. Use the promo code MajorityReport. You get $25 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's Brooklinen, BROOKLINEN.com. Enter the promo code MajorityReport for $25 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's brooklinen.com, promo code MajorityReport. Also, today's program brought to you by Stamps.com. Look, you know me. I don't like to leave the house. I don't like to leave the office. I don't like to do things that aren't totally efficient. Taking trips to the post office, probably not how you want to spend your time. That's why I recommend mailing and shipping online at Stamps.com. Stamps.com allows you to mail and ship anytime, literally anytime. And you can do it anywhere right from your computer. You send letters, ship packages, pay a lot less with discounted rates from USPS, UPS, and more. Stamps.com, use your computer to print official U.S. postage 24/7. 3 a.m., no problem. 2 a.m., no problem. 11 a.m., no problem. Obviously, all the PMs, too. Any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere you want to send it. Then you just schedule a pickup or you drop it off, whatever's convenient for you. With Stamps.com, you get discounts of up to 40% off post office rates and up to 62% off UPS shipping rates. Stamps.com is a no-brainer, and it saves you time and it saves you money. Stop wasting time. Go to Stamps.com instead of the post office. There's no risk. My promo code MajorityReport, 2 words, you get a special offer, trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in Majority Report. That's Stamps.com, promo code Majority Report, Stamps.com. You'll never go to the post office or leave your home again. Hey, folks. You shouldn't have to choose between a great shave and a fair price. And with Harry's, you don't have to. For a limited time, Harry's is offering their starter set plus a free travel size body wash at harrys.com/majority. Look, you've heard me say this many times before. Harry's delivers a close, comfortable shave, and they do so at a fair price. Still as low as $2 per refill. How do they do it? Harry's bought a German razor blade factory that has been making blades for over 100 years. That's a century to you and I. Harry's design team combines a weighted ergonomic handle with a textured grip. It's beautiful, actually. Very classic. It's got a flex hinge. It's smart. It's simple. It's got a razor that is designed for delivering a close shave along all the contours of your face. You don't need one of those like buffed up things that look like you're out some type of tactical maneuver. They stand behind the quality of their blades so much they have a 100% money-back guarantee on harrys.com. It gives you a great close shave. It's got that narrower shave head so that if you've got a nostril issue like myself, it takes care of it. Shaves just as well as one of those razors you go to the the drugstore for and then have to carry out that huge plastic case. But it's also just much more reasonable, less expensive, and they mail it to you. For a limited time, Harry's has their exclusive offer for it even better. For listeners of this show, new customers can get a special offer in a Harry starter set and a body wash at harrys.com/majority. This is a limited time. It's the best offer you're going to find. You'll get a 5-blade razor, weighted Truman handle, foaming shave gel, a travel blade cover, and a travel-size body wash. There has never been a better time to try Harry's. Try it now. Go to harrys.com/majority to redeem your free offer today.
Thanks, Sam. I would like to welcome to the program. Are you there, Edo? There you are. I would like to welcome to the program Edo Konrad, editor-in-chief of 972 Magazine. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So, I just want to start with what happened in last week's elections in Israel. Let's really just start very broadly, and then we can narrow it down, a 30,000-foot view, if you will. So this was the first election, or fourth election, I should say, in 2 years in Israel. And there seems to be permanent gridlock. It appears Netanyahu won't be able to form a governing majority. Can you take us through both last week's elections and what led us to this point over the past few years under Netanyahu?
Sure. So I'll start just with your second question. Basically the Israeli political system has been trying to get a large part of the Israeli political system has been trying to get rid of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the last few years unsuccessfully. He has been accused and is sitting trial for corruption scandals, multiple corruption scandals. And a large part of the political system just finds that unacceptable today. And so for the past 3-4 elections have actually been about yes Netanyahu or no Netanyahu. And the political system has been divided effectively into 2 blocks. The parties that support Netanyahu and the politicians that support Netanyahu, and the politicians that oppose Netanyahu. And really over the last 4 elections, we've been seeing the anti-Bibi bloc trying to get rid of him unsuccessfully, but at the same time, Netanyahu has not been able to gain the seats necessary in the Knesset, in Israel's parliament, to actually form a ruling coalition, with the exception of the last elections that happened last March, in which Netanyahu basically cajoled his rival Benny Gantz into joining him under the pretext of fighting COVID-19 together in a so-called unity government. And so that actually effectively collapsed over the last few months, sending us back into elections. And the 4th election, as you mentioned, the 4th election in 2 years took place last week, in which yet again, neither the pro-Netanyahu coalition nor the anti-Netanyahu coalition was able to get the numbers necessary to form a coalition outright. And so now we kind of are going into a situation in which both sides are jockeying for votes, trying to get the parties and different politicians on their side in order to form the necessary, to get the necessary 61 Knesset seats. And so what we actually saw happen last week was, apart from the gridlock, which you mentioned, was 3 kind of big things that happened. Number one, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, their vote was split between 2 parties: the Joint List, which is an alliance of the major streams of political thought in Israel, and the Islamist party, Ra'am, which split off from the Joint List earlier this year. And so we saw that the vote actually being split between those 2 parties. And actually the most interesting part of that is that a lot of Palestinian citizens, because of that split, stayed home on election day. So the Palestinian political power actually decreased in the last election. The other thing that we saw when it comes to voting patterns was that Netanyahu's kind of historic voting bloc, his base, a lot of them did stay home as well in the more kind of peripheral Mizrahi voting blocks in what's called the development towns around Israel. A lot of them actually stayed home and didn't vote for him.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating because from my understanding, Netanyahu has had a base that turns out for him every time. And so that has made the opposition effort so difficult. And I just want to rewind to Benny Gantz and the Blue and White Party, because from an outsider's perspective, when you're making your coalition about anti-Netanyahu versus pro-Netanyahu, right? There's so much ideological fluidity, and it was difficult to see what Gantz even stood for, and that kind of came full circle when he immediately turned on the people that he supported him and caved to Netanyahu. So can you explore that moment and how that kind of led to, in what I've read, what seems like a lot of political disillusionment on behalf of voters who threw all their energy behind this anti-Netanyahu effort that ended up just kind of blowing up?
Yeah, so Gantz's big kind of pitch to the Israeli public was that he would never sit with Netanyahu for successive, election cycles. This is what he sold the Israeli public, and it worked. Gantz is the former IDF chief of staff. He's an Ashkenazi man from the military brass. He is kind of the archetype of the center-left politician in Israel. And really what he sold Israelis was a return to what we call in Hebrew mamlachtiyut, which is like maybe another way of saying stateliness, a return to the kind of Israel of yore, the good Israel.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, then exactly. So I mean, it's not exactly make Israel great again, because if anything, Gantz wants to take us away from the more Trumpian kind of way of doing politics.
More Biden-esque in terms of return to...
Yeah, sure. Okay, so yeah, a return to like a Biden-esque normalcy. So, that just didn't work when he had the chance to form the coalition. He was actually tapped by the president last March to form the ruling coalition. And he had the opportunity to make a kind of, I'd call it a historic decision to form a coalition with the backing of the Joint List. And the Joint List also, compromised on their ideals in a lot of ways by saying, okay, we're going to back this former IDF chief of staff who launched his first election campaign back in 2019 by bragging about how many Palestinians he had killed as chief of staff in Gaza. And so, they made this big ideological compromise in order to defeat Netanyahu, because they really, I think, believed that Gantz was serious about the one election promise that he was making to Israelis. And at the end of the day, it just seemed, probably too politically costly for Gantz. Maybe he thought his coalition would fall apart. And I think part of him also trusted Netanyahu. Netanyahu was like, okay, you can come into this government. We'll have a rotation government. I'll be prime minister for 18 months. Then you take over, and we'll fight COVID together, and we'll beat this thing, right? And so in retrospect, it sounds absurd. And at the time, I think to many people, it was absurd. What's really interesting also that we've seen in the results is that Gantz, we expected Gantz to crash. A lot of us thought, like, who is going to vote for this guy after he really betrayed the Israeli public? And he actually managed to eke out 7 Knesset seats, which is not a bad showing at all, considering that his party completely broke up. The Blue and White Party split up after he effectively ditched them and went with Netanyahu. So that was a really, really big surprise for a lot of us that he managed to get those votes.
How is he center-left? Based on Israel's political spectrum, the fact that he, from my reading of things, was during his jostling with Netanyahu, basically a bake-off who could be more anti-Palestinian and more xenophobic towards Palestinians and Israeli Palestinians as well. So how is that considered center-left in Israel?
That's a good question. I think Gantz, through the different election cycles that he's trying to defeat Netanyahu, has taken different stances. He's taken more conciliatory stances toward Palestinian citizens. When annexation was on the table and Trump's deal of the century was on the table, he took a much more right-wing approach, probably at the behest of his political advisors, who told him, this is where the political current is. You need to lean in hard to the right in order to gain maybe some Likud voters who are disillusioned with Netanyahu and his corruption trial, so lean hard into the right. On the other hand, you saw Netanyahu run 3 campaigns very, very, very strongly and stridently against Palestinian citizens. And in this last election, you saw him actually kind of portray himself, at least at the outset, as a great uniter, the great uniter of Israeli society. The fact that the Islamists broke off from the joint list was a huge political boon to Netanyahu. At least that's how he saw it, and he really tried to leverage that. His COVID-19 campaign, this vaccination campaign, was heavily based in Palestinian villages and towns and cities across Israel. And so all of a sudden, you had someone who has incited repeatedly against Palestinian leaders and citizens take a much more conciliatory tone. So I think it kind of, on the one hand, it's a very cynical way of understanding Israeli politics. What is center left? What is the left? What is the right? And I'm not sure anyone has a really good answer. And on the other hand, I think it kind of goes to show that Palestinian citizens, for many in the Zionist consensus, the Zionist consensus in Israeli politics, are a tool to win elections, are a tool to make sure that a vaccination campaign will be successful. But Palestinian citizens have their own desires, have their own political agenda. It's a very a varied political agenda. They don't agree on necessarily all the terms, but it goes beyond whether someone like Benny Gantz is going to lead the country or whether Netanyahu is going to lead the country. Or in this case, in this election, we saw Yair Lapid is kind of the big victor after these elections for the so-called center left.
So let's then bring it to the joint list, which you keep referencing, right? And the break off of Mansour Abbas, who is a Palestinian Israeli politician who seems to be signaling that he's siding with Netanyahu. And my understanding is that the joint list was a lot more centrist than what Abbas is trying to put forward as a Palestinian Israeli politician. More right-wing, more anti-LGBTQ seems to be something he's hanging his hat on in order to buddy up with Netanyahu, who's in power, who seems to be using him as a prop in many ways in order to appear less extreme than Netanyahu is. So can you talk about that dynamic, why the faction in the joint list happened, and how Abbas is positioning himself in regards to Netanyahu?
So I think one of the kind of basic things we need to understand about the joint list is that it was formed and forged out of necessity when Avigdor Lieberman, a far-right Israeli politician who's considered a centrist, to your previous question, he's considered kind of a center-right, but he is a hawk and a nationalist. He actually put forth a law to bring up the election threshold to make it harder for smaller parties, which are typically the Arab parties in the Israeli parliament, to make it into the Knesset. So this actually forced the 4 major political factions in Palestinian society: the communists, the nationalists, the Islamists, and I'd say Ahmed Tibi, who has just this kind of politician that is unclear exactly where to place him on the spectrum, but forced all of them into this party that I think the right did not really correctly estimate how powerful they could be when together. What happened, I think, that really started the breakup of the list, and I don't attribute this to any necessarily wrongdoing or malice, was Ayman Odeh, the chairman of the list, voted to support Benny Gantz, and the list actually voted to support Benny Gantz in the previous elections before Benny Gantz turned his back on them and went into the government with Netanyahu. This was kind of seen as a pivotal moment. And so what Mansour Abbas does this time around, he says, well, okay, Ayman Odeh did this last time. He said, okay, we're ready to make this historic compromise with someone who brags about.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I should just quickly say they were very successful in teaming up with Benny Gantz, and it showed, wow, they won 15 seats. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends who you ask. I think, historically, if you're looking at Israeli politics, it's considered like a very big success, and it shows just how kind of it shows that you can't actually make any big political moves in Israeli society today without Palestinian citizens. And so Mansour Abbas internalized that. He understood that, and he knew that. Now, one thing we need to understand about Mansour Abbas is that, he is an Islamist, but he comes from the more moderate kind of segment of Islamist politics. In previous election cycles, he's spoken, he hasn't spoken outright against the LGBTQ community. He said he needs to study the issue, and although he held conservative positions, a man is a man, a woman is a woman, kind of things that we hear typically from conservative circles, that won't sound foreign to many Americans and many people in the West. He wasn't using his bully pulpit to come down hard on the LGBTQ community. Now, in this election cycle, he's really neat as he broke off from the joint list and he saw the opportunity that Netanyahu could potentially give him, and inspired, I'd say, by the fact that that Ayman Odeh previously said, yeah, we're gonna take these chances, we're gonna kind of break from precedent, and he used that, and he used his conservative politics to basically bolster his political standing, and he really tried to burnish those conservative Islamist credentials, and this time really coming out against the LGBTQ community and trying to differentiate himself from the rest of the joint list, which you said that they've taken more centrist positions. They actually have taken many progressive positions as well, and it's hard to really place them because they're this hodgepodge of different ideologies. But at this, while many of them do hold more, I'd say, reactionary positions, some of them also hold very progressive and left-wing positions on LGBTQ rights, certainly on Palestinian rights, certainly on the occupation, workers' rights, et cetera. So what Abbas is basically doing is saying, I am no longer part of this alliance, and I am going to show you exactly what political Islam stands for, and I'm going to make, this is going to be a new kind of chapter in Palestinian Jewish relations in Israeli society, and at the same time, I'm going to be a kingmaker. I'm going to be the one who gets to decide whether I go with Netanyahu or whether I go with Yair Lapid or whoever leads the anti-Bibi bloc now.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating, but like, outside of his own careerism, what does that substantively mean for Palestinian citizens? Because, he can posture in terms of religious fundamentalism or religious, anti-LGBTQ positions, but what does that mean for the occupation based on how he's going to cozy up to Netanyahu? Like, that is so unclear to me, and that would seem to be the number one issue if you were representing Palestinian Israelis.
So I think what Abbas has done, and this is to his kind of credit, is say there are certain issues, there are certain red lines that I will not cross. That in order to be in any coalition government, I will demand an end to home demolitions of Palestinian homes inside Israel. I will demand the repeal of the Jewish nation state law, a law that passed in 2018 that constitutionally enshrines the second class status of Palestinian citizens and non-Jews in Israel effectively. And so there are certain things that are kind of widely accepted in Palestinian society as priorities, political priorities for any political leader to try and push through. What Abbas isn't doing is actually putting issues like the occupation and the national rights of Palestinian citizens of Israel as top priorities. And this kind of differentiates him from the joint list and the various factions in the joint list. And to his credit, whether we like it or not, there are strong currents in Arab society in Israel and Palestinian society in Israel that are saying, yeah, we just want basic civil rights. Don't demolish our homes. Treat us like you would treat any other citizen. The national stuff we can put to the side. The being recognized as a national minority, recognizing Arabic, re-recognizing Arabic as a national language. These kinds of things seem to be less pertinent to Mansour Abbas today. That doesn't mean that there isn't kind of a clash over these ideologies. inside Palestinian society. And this is something that we're going to see play out, I think, over the next few years. If there's another election, it'll be really, really interesting to see how that'll play out in the next election.
How much of that has to do with just Palestinians feeling beaten down by this political process and feeling like there's no voice and like, oh, we're going to accept basically crumbs from the one guy that can get close to Netanyahu? I mean, that's what it sounds like to me.
So, I mean, one thing we need to know about the Islamist politics in Israel is that most people don't know that much about it. I mean, people inside and commentators and experts definitely know a lot about Islamist politics in Israel, but to the lay person, a lot of people really didn't expect him to get the necessary 4 seats to, pass the election threshold and to enter Knesset. And a lot of people were extremely surprised, myself included, by the numbers that the Islamist Party was able to garner in these elections. These are, they have people, activists across the country riling up support for Abbas. So that's kind of a basic thing that we need to remember about this party. They have a lot of popular support relative to, at least to what a lot of people expected. I think, to answer your question, kind of looking at it from the side, not as a Palestinian, but looking at it from the side, I think the joint list, when it ran together with the Islamists last time around, won 15 seats. That's a record high for the joint list since it was formed in 2015, out of those kind of political circumstances of necessity. And so it's hard for me to say. I think that what we can say is that when they run together, all four parties run together, there's a lot more excitement in Palestinian communities. Still, despite the tensions inside the parties between the varying ideologies, and not just between the Islamists and the rest of them, but between the communists and the nationalists and the liberals, it's a difficult kind of ship to steer. That when they work together and put aside those differences and say, okay, we can agree on a set of political principles that we want to put forward, they do get a lot more support from Palestinians, and Palestinians feel actually, I think, empowered by that, and they do go out and vote in relatively high numbers. So it's not so much that the best that they can hope for is crumbs from Mansour Abbas. I think maybe a different way of framing it is that when they work together and they do talk about issues like the occupation, as well as issues that directly affect Palestinian citizens of Israel, their power is almost unrivaled by any other political force in Israel. And that's really, to their credit, is what's made them so formidable for the kind of the Jewish Zionist consensus in Israel, and what has made Palestinian politics essential to both understand and to take into account when thinking about what's politically possible in Israel.
Right. And so then let's bring it back to, I guess, extremism from the Zionist side, really, and why this is also just especially a dangerous situation in how Netanyahu is appealing to Jewish extremism and far-right forces within Israel in order to gain power in parliament. Now, they actually won this time around. This far-right party that I think associated with past terroristic acts. Itamar Ben-Gvir, I hope I pronounced it semi-okay. Can you talk about him as a leader of the far-right movement there? How Netanyahu cozied up to him in order to try to build his coalition, which seems he may have failed still. What that means for Israeli politics, who he is, and what the roots in Jewish extremism mean for politics as a whole.
Sure. So I think I'll start by talking about Netanyahu. That for Netanyahu, the name of the game is political survival. He's facing these corruption trials that really can not only put an end to his political career, but land him in prison for quite a long time. And so this is his number one priority: political survival. And in order to do that, he needs to form a coalition that will pass a law that will prevent a sitting prime minister from actually facing trial and going to prison over anything, basically. So this is in his interest to stay in power. And Netanyahu, for all of the terrible things that we can say about him, he is kind of leagues above all of the rest of Israel's politicians, because he understands, I think he has the most to lose in this situation, and really will do what just seemed impossible in the past, and seemed outrageous in the past, in order to stay in power. And it might work for him. We're yet to see whether it will work for him, but it might work for him.
I don't know if that can be spun as a positive, but I hear your point.
Yeah, I don't think it's a positive thing, but it is kind of, he plays politics. Like he really plays politics, and it's a no holds barred game for him. And so in order to do this, he knew this isn't the first time that he's done this. He needs to bring in extremists into his already far right bloc that he depends on. And so he has tapped Itamar Ben-Gvir, the head of Otzma Yehudit, the name for the Jewish Power Party in Israel, whose roots lie in an ideology called Kahanism, based on the ideology of Rabbi Meir Kahane, an American Jew who started the Jewish Defense League in the United States, which was designated a terrorist organization by the United States. He moved to Israel and formed a political party that was banned in the Knesset, and then also designated a terrorist organization. And so Itamar Ben-Gvir, like his ideological predecessor, believes in basically a Palestinian-free Israel, transferring Palestinians, kicking them out of the country, installing some kind of theocratic government, instead of what we might call a liberal democracy, though I'm not sure that term applies to Israel so much, but instead of democratic institutions, religious institutions that would rule the country, and really just the face of what we would call Jewish extremism in Israel today. He distances himself from Kahane, though he does call him a great man, I think, in order to kind of put on a friendly face to the Israeli media, which really, he's this kind of like almost like this like teddy bear extremist. He's like very charming. He's invited to newsrooms, and this is the same guy that in the 90s pulled the sign off of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's car and said, we got to Rabin's car. Soon enough, we'll get to the prime minister himself too. The prime minister was eventually assassinated by a right-wing Jewish extremist.
Yes. Which to the very ideology that was part of his formation into a political person. So I mean, it's
right,
deeply like dark and prescient.
Right, and so I agree with all those things, and so Ben-Gvir essentially joined up with another extremist called Bezalel Smotrich, who represents kind of another edge of the far right of the religious Zionist movement in Israel, and the Noam Party, which just has run a blatantly homophobic campaign. Their entire existence is predicated on kind of restoring the normative Jewish family, very, very homophobic. And so those three parties, those three slates ran together as one, and Netanyahu effectively tapped them to be part of his coalition. He encouraged the unity between Ben-Gvir and Smotrich in order for them to pass the election threshold and get as many seats as possible so that they could be in his coalition, so that Netanyahu could get 61 seats, so that Netanyahu could pass the law to protect him from going to prison. So all of this political calculus, this short-sighted political calculus of one man, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, brings in these dark forces back into the Knesset, where they haven't been for a long time. I think one thing that's important to know about Kahanism, and a writer for 972 magazine, Natasha Roth-Roland, said this on one of our podcast episodes, is that Kahanism doesn't actually necessarily need a political party to thrive. Because its roots lay in this kind of ambiguous tension between the Jewish and democratic tension in the state of Israel. The Kahanists don't believe in the democratic part of the state of Israel. They only believe in the Jewish part of Israel. But since Israel's founding in 1948, hundreds and hundreds of laws have been passed to back essentially the Jewish part of the state of Israel, whether it's been the law of return, land confiscations of Palestinian refugees, expropriation of more land, the Jewish nation state law, the entire existence of the state of Israel is there to bolster Jewish presence and a Jewish demographic majority and Jewish power over non-Jews in the country. With these kind of liberal democratic institutions that exist almost alongside of it. But Kahanism kind of understands, what Kahana did was he understood that at the heart of the matter is you don't need a Kahana in the Knesset. You don't effectively need an Itamar Ben-Gvir in the Knesset in order for these things in order for the spirit of Kahana to float above the parliament and to be part of the kind of daily politics of this place.
But and I know we'll let you go shortly, but lastly, but now there is now that ideology is in the Knesset, and that was an explicit decision or strategy by Netanyahu in order to protect himself really from this corruption trial, and to tie it back to Abbas. Abbas has also signaled that he might support legislation or a law that would protect Netanyahu from this corruption trial. So let's bring it back. How much of this is really, well, you kind of already answered it, but this is so much about Netanyahu's trial and protecting himself. Really, the question is, what are the long-term ramifications based on that short-term decision to protect one guy?
It's a good question. One of the basic kind of things that I think people should know is that Israelis are right-wing. The majority of Israelis support right-wing ideas. They vote for right-wing parties. If it weren't for Netanyahu, the right wing in Israel would easily be able to form a coalition. And Netanyahu has basically, so many people have gotten so sick of him that they've defected from his party. You have Gideon Sa'ar, who is a Likudnik, who formed his own party, who otherwise would have been in Likud. And you have people like Naftali Bennett, who is also a religious Zionist, but kind of a more stately version of the religious Zionist stream, who's unsure about whether or not he'll recommend Netanyahu, or he'll recommend Lapid, or he'll take us to another election. And so without Netanyahu kind of holding politics hostage, we would already have a right-wing majority in the Knesset. The left and the central left in Israel and the Palestinian parties are still a minority in Israeli society and in voting patterns, and they would be a minority in any Knesset that we would see. The long-term ramifications of Netanyahu bringing in the Kahanists is, if they are able to form a coalition, is more, I'd say, even harsher laws being passed against Palestinian citizens, more warmongering, many more conservative bills being put to the plenum, and I think a really, really bad situation. Like I would not be looking forward to a situation in which not only would Ben-Gvir be in the coalition, but he would also be holding onto a ministerial portfolio. So really averting that in the short term is a good thing. But if you want to look at the long game, it's not Ben-Gvir who we should be talking about. It's kind of this idea that Israelis are already so right-wing. They already support right-wing policies and right-wing parties. And I think that without kind of an alternative to that, that offers Israelis a different way, and in many ways, I think the Joint List is the kind of beginning of that. Offers Israelis a different way forward, a way forward based on equality and rights for all and social solidarity. Without that, the lurch to the right will continue and continue and continue.
Okay, I lied. Last question. So how do you build leftist power? You've written about the need to do so. You talk about the Joint List there. There's also the remnants of the Labor Party, right? I mean, the fall from grace for the Labor Party is, you can talk about that and touch on that in your answer. But what do you think is the path forward for building leftist power, as Netanyahu has had the stranglehold over that country, and right-wing ideology, as you mentioned, just has become so entrenched?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I had one kind of decisive answer that would people would listen to and be convinced of. I think it starts with kind of putting front and center the most marginalized communities and letting them lead. And that begins with Palestinian citizens of Israel. And it means that, the more leftist, left-ish, dovish Zionist parties like Meretz and Labor, first of all, show solidarity with Palestinian citizens of Israel. I know Meretz does that to a certain degree. But I think it won't start from the Knesset. It won't start from parliament that's already, as I mentioned before, like so skewed to the right. Israeli society is already such a society that's geared toward maintaining Jewish, I don't like the term Jewish power, but Jewish supremacy over Israel-Palestine, the entirety of Israel-Palestine, that I think these things will start from outside the Knesset, and they'll start from grassroots organizing on the left, organizations that believe first and foremost in equality and solidarity with all kind of oppressed groups in Israel-Palestine, starting with Palestinians, but certainly not limited to Palestinian citizens, extended to Ethiopian citizens and extended to Mizrahi communities and the LGBTQ communities. And I think building a foundation that's based not on how do we kind of continue and entrench Jewish supremacy, but how do we break that down? And how do we break down those walls of fear toward fear and animosity toward Palestinian citizens of Israel, and say, okay, you're not only an essential part of the society that we want to build here, you are the leaders of the fight toward that kind of vision.
Thank you so much. Edo Konrad, 972 Magazine. Where can people find some more of your work? Right there?
Yeah, www.972mag.com. And follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. Listen to our monthly podcast. We're everywhere.
Appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks so much.
We are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. All right, so we'll end on this and then head into the fun half. Pete Buttigieg, back on the scene. Over the weekend, I believe it was on Friday, he went out on a limb and went a bit rogue and decided he was going to speak for the Biden administration on a proposal surrounding climate change and transportation. Now, we'll see how that turned out for him. Let's first take a listen to what he said on Friday.
Just give me 1 second here.
Sure. No problem. Again, guys, it's just me and Matt this week. Brendan and Sam are out, so Matt's doing 2 jobs.
The link went to a Chris Wallace clip, which was not what I was looking for. From yesterday, sorry. And now I can't find. Oh, here it is. Okay. So if you want to set that up, give me just a little bit.
Sure, no problem. So Pete Buttigieg, he on Friday made a bold proclamation about a potential transportation policy related to climate change that seemed to be not connected to anything the Biden administration, Biden's his boss, I'm not sure if Pete's aware of that, was proposing. And to me, it sounded like something Fox News would make up in order to make the left wing seem elitist and characterize climate change proposals as burdensome on the regular person. But Pete ran with it anyway. So this is what he said on Friday, and then we'll see how quickly he had to walk it back.
Long-term answer.
What about a mileage-based tax?
So I think that shows a lot of promise. If we believe in that so-called user pays principle, the idea that part of how we pay for roads is you pay based on how much you drive, the gas tax used to be the obvious way to do it. It's not anymore. So a so-called vehicle miles traveled tax or mileage tax, whatever you want to call it, could be a way to do it. Long-term answer.
Yeah, so a mileage tax, all right? That is a regressive idea. Now, I know that states like Oregon have floated a mileage tax, but that is in order to get electric vehicles to basically pay what the gas tax does. In order for the ability to drive, you should be paying some sort of tax. But again, why is that falling on the people who are driving, especially the people who are driving electric cars, which is something we're supposed to be incentivizing? We already have toll roads as well. So this was such a bad kind of him talking out of his ass moment that on Saturday, the New York Times reported that an official from the Department of Transportation had to walk it back. And then Buttigieg had to go on TV with Jake Tapper and walk it back publicly again.
Said also that a mileage tax showed, quote, a lot of promise as a way to help pay for the plan. That tax would charge people for how many miles they drive. Is that under consideration?
No, that's not part of the conversation about this infrastructure bill. So just want to make sure that's really clear. But you will be hearing a lot more details in the coming days about how we envision being able to fund this. And again, these are carefully thought through, responsible ideas that ultimately are going to be a win for the economy and need to be compared to the unaffordable cost of the status quo.
Okay, so something about...
Wait, don't play that.
Oh, okay, 1 second.
Just goes something of a backtrack. That was the most satisfying part.
We are going to be a win for the economy and need to be compared to the unaffordable cost of the status quo.
Okay, so something of a backtrack on that. Let me add also...
Another thing that, Pete, I thought you were down home and you were from Indiana, and that made you a really relatable presidential candidate, even though you talk like you were built in the lab to be a politician. Rural areas would also be hit hardest with this. And this is another reason it was tailor-made for conservative fear-mongering about climate change policy. More miles are driven in rural areas. And so a mileage tax would be a bad way to implement it in terms of just the geographical diversity of this country. Fox News was jumping all over this all over the weekend. As soon as Buttigieg said it, they had commentary about it. And so he had to walk it back immediately. Do find it a bit satisfying. Obviously, if I were to have to pick between Biden and Buttigieg for president, based on what Biden's done thus far, I probably would pick Biden. But back then, I don't even know what that was. That would be. That was a real Sophie's choice there, not a good one. But it is amusing to me and strangely gratifying for Buttigieg to be told, no, you're not making these decisions on your own.
Yeah, I mean...
Boss, you don't get to live out your kind of bureaucratic fantasy where you're the kingmaker in this situation. This is a legislative issue, and go back to being transportation secretary, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's telling that it didn't come up in his initial response at all that, oh, this might be insanely regressive, particularly to rural poor people. I will say I am of two minds about this as a North Dakotan, but also someone who hates cars. I think the way that you do this is you tax the rich people and build enough public transportation and alternatives to the automobile, which I think has been horrible. And I think there's a certain desire for an electric car to sort of maintain this personal automobile hell that I would describe modern cities to have become. Just freeways through neighborhoods that obviously have a lot of like racial implications and stuff like that. I think the car has been a disaster and I don't like it. But yeah, you can't do it in a regressive way. You just can't do it, particularly if you're a Democratic Party that wants to start like, shaving the margins you're getting killed by in rural areas. Just completely insane. And he should know better coming from Indiana, but of course that's not really where he comes from. He comes from the neoliberal petri dish.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's the substantive point that Matt's talking about, but the political point is even bigger, just based on the fact that there are already many regressive taxes that are in place in order to but actually that isn't the point. In this infrastructure bill, it should be very much a tax on the companies and the corporations that are continuing to pump fossil fuels into our country, and that's what should fund that public infrastructure, and wealthy Americans as well. You don't make it a flat, which eventually becomes regressive, mileage tax that would then target rural poor people in a very difficult and specific, disproportionate way. But really, just how would you think when you're talking to the media and you're that calculated of a guy that would be a good political winning point, especially when it seems like it wasn't agreed upon by the administration? Although maybe it was discussed, and then as soon as they saw the backlash, they walked it back. But to me, this smells of Buttigieg, thinking he's a little bit bigger for his britches than he actually is.
Yeah, I mean, the Gilets jaunes protests in France were caused by a fuel tax that Macron eventually had to scrap. I think you don't want to be draw too direct of an analogy, because France will go to the barricades over a lot. I mean, not that America hasn't, protested recently, but,
richer history in terms
you're playing with fire.
Yeah, right. Yes, you're playing with fire
or the fuel for fire.
Yeah, you're pouring gasoline on a fire. There we go. Gas tax. All right, we are going to head into the fun half, but first, Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning?
Oh yeah, folks, go subscribe. Got a nice little bump to subscribers from YouTube chat. Again, people, you can give you permission to navigate away from this during our transition to the fun half and go subscribe to Left Reckoning, where on Thursday night we had Shama Sawan to talk about the BS recall effort against her and how to build socialist power at a local level, and also Wozni Lambre to talk about the threatened 1964 All-Star Game threat by Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, and Oscar Robertson that won the NBA Players Association for that was not being recognized by the owners. But prior to that, the Red Auerbach, like that, those type of villains. So we talk about that. Go check that out at patreon.com/Left Reckoning. But more importantly, go subscribe today. That's the call to action. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel, folks.
Yes, please subscribe. We want to bump up Matt's subscribers. And
let's bring in Nomi so she can.
Yes, so she can plug.
She can plug. Yeah, and this week we're doing a show on legalization of marijuana around the country with Brian Brown. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Hey, Nomiki.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Plug Matt a little bit more. It was very interesting to me because I'm like, wow, I'm getting confused about all these different state laws and which ones are substantively better than the other. They're going to break that down on Left Reckoning, which, marijuana laws are actually quite restrictive and which aren't, as legalization ramps up throughout the country. Nomi, what's happening on your show?
What's up, Emma? Hi. Looking good. The lighting is exceptionally lovely on that side, I have to say.
You think so? I kind of miss my lighting over there. I think it's darker, so it makes me look more tan, but not make me look tan.
You look very like even. It's I'm a big fan of good lighting, which I don't know how to do in my place because that's like an expertise in its own. Anyways, today is a big day because it is the Amazon vote, and we have Chris Smalls on, who of course was the Amazon worker who went to war with Amazon during COVID, over COVID, how they were dealing with COVID in Staten Island at the facility there. He's based in New Jersey. He's been organizing relentlessly. He's been on the show many times. You guys are probably aware of him. So he's going to be on as our main guest. And then later we have Joshua Kahn Russell and Napoleon the Legend on to discuss all the newsiness of the day.
Beautiful. Wonderful. All right, let's head into the fun half, and we got some clips, we got some calls, we got some IMs, we got some bing, we got some boom. Let's go.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
No, he won't, but I will be. As me and Matt. We're going to take your calls. Just open the phone lines.
This is the time to ask us. We've always wanted to know about Matt, Emma, and Nomi.
Right. All of the questions, except the inappropriate ones.
Except the ones we won't answer.
Yes, exactly. Calling from a 314 number. Calling from a 314 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Emma. This is Chris from Taiwan.
Chris from Taiwan. How are you?
Doing all right. So first of all, I just want to say, Emma, you're doing a really good job.
Thank you.
Losing Michael and then Jamie was a big loss. You have big shoes to fill, and you're doing good.
I know it. Thank you.
Different shoes. There's no filling. Everyone's got their own shoe. It's like a snowflake.
Okay, fair enough. Right. Each one is individuated. Same to you, Matt.
Unlike shoes, which are mass produced. And
Matt, I was just a marketing patron, so same to you. You're doing a good job. You and Dave.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, listen. I'm sorry to do this to you guys, but I'm calling about Glenn Greenwald.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
I'm going to go on mute.
Listen, okay. So here's what I want to say. There has been this convention in recent years where anyone who's a leftist, if they want to criticize Glenn, who, by the way, used to be one of my favorite journalists and commentators.
Same. Absolutely admired him with, like, ferocity.
Yeah. And so for good reason, I think, you know, in recent years, anyone on the left who ever wanted to criticize Glenn would preface the criticism with some, you know, kind of soliloquy about what a great journalist he is and what a hero he is.
I think I did that up until last week.
Okay, so all I'm saying, and not just to you, but like to anyone listening, I think we can stop doing that now.
Yes, I'm done.
I think we can stop preferencing our criticisms with these caveats. And also, like, I got to be honest, like looking back on it, I mean, was he really such a great journalist? He kind of just got lucky, didn't he? Like Snowden dropped the story of the century in his lap.
I mean, well then.
Same thing with Lava Jato reporting in Brazil. I mean, he didn't go digging for this stuff and do tons of really great journalistic work.
We don't know that. I mean, I think given.
Yeah, I think this.
I think given the like breadth of what he reported on with at least Operation Car Wash, and also just what I've read from the Snowden files, I have no doubt that he worked very hard on that reporting. And given what we saw and how he had to live in Brazil, it seems like the threat from the United States was real.
Oh, that part I don't deny. I mean, obviously, he and his husband were in serious danger, and I'm not trying to deny that. But I don't know. I say this as someone who's just really extremely disappointed. And so, like, I think it's clear at this point that this guy is a troll. I mean, people call him a grifter, but I don't even think that's correct. A grifter does stuff like this for money. He seems to just be doing
No, it's for money.
Well,
let me just quickly say this, Matt. To me, it's a case study in how social media has completely warped somebody's brain. And it makes me sad more than anything, even as he goes after me personally. Well, I mean, look, it was fair for him to respond. We covered his show. So fine.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like there is something to be said about work actually. I actually don't mind the preferencing and the discussion of the previous, work and unauthorized disclosures. I think that is what journalists should be doing, and I think like reiterating those values is a good thing to do when talking about him, because there are people who aren't with us or on this, having reached this level and being done with Glenn, so forth, right? They're still familiar with him for what he's done in this regard. So I think like, I don't know. I don't know how fruitful it is. I think my stance is wait for more of that good work and then, applaud it when it comes. And as far as like the more cultural stuff, like I don't know. I'm not that interested in it. I think we all see what it is.
I just think this is a big giant waste of time at this point. I think that there are a lot of people right now who have motivations. Some of them are personal, based on this online ecosystem that we live in. Some of them are financial. I mean, the ecosystem of this online space is very ego driven. Like you're addicted to clicks, you're addicted to tweets, you're addicted to, and then you see the money coming in. And some people, that is their first basis of experience. Like that's where they are driven. Some people are driven, they don't care about clicks, they're driven to change. It depends on what your priorities are. And some, many have experienced tremendous trauma, which I have no doubt Glenn has. But I think ultimately, there is a group of people who are in an ecosystem, whether they're conscious of it or not, or maybe it's not their priority, it's like second on the list, where there's a political agenda. And I think that political agenda to pull some of the left, divide some of the left, is capped right now. And they're not, and now you just see people flailing. I mean, articles are popping up with conspiracy theories and, they're trying to be sensationalist and it's just like, it's not working. So I choose to not engage at this point, because I just think that the moment where it was really growing and it was a little bit of a crisis when they were pushing stuff a few months ago, that they've hit their cap. And so anything further is just them trying to get attention, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess what Matt said is kind of right. Like, let's wait and see if there's any more good work. I don't think there's going to be. I mean, this guy is like promoting like TERF stuff and Nazi stuff for fun.
Yeah. He was always doing that. He used to represent Nazis when he was a lawyer.
Well, but that's different than like going to bat for white supremacists on Twitter. I mean, but nonetheless.
Well, just to be clear, for their ability to fundraise for their legal defenses. I mean, I understand.
It's a decision you make when you're choosing clients. There's always a reason. There's always a case. There's always a something. But you have a decision as a lawyer of what kind of clients you want to choose. Nobody's forcing you to do that.
That is also true.
Anyhow, I used to really love this guy, and I used to do the same thing, preferencing my criticisms with like talking about what a hero he is. But like, I'm just done with that. It sounds like maybe some of you are too, and so I was just calling.
Totally hear that, Chris. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to validate your view here. I think it's very much aligned with how I feel, and really, I mean, I think there's like a social disconnect kind of. He's so disconnected from the people he's attacking, and it's like all Twitter based, and there's floods of it's not endorphins, but just like it's like a drug. Some of this.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I just want to say on this is I understand. I can see the principle behind, say, defending people from cancellation from tech platforms or their ability to fundraise for their legal defenses, but I also think it'd be nice to spare a word for like the GOP disenfranchisement of voters on a mass and a mass operational scale for specific partisan, like that's also concerning to me. And I think it's weird when one thing is emphasized to the exclusion of the other.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to indulge anyone talking about cancel culture if they never say a word about like voter suppression in Georgia or white supremacist violence against Asian people or whatever else,
Yeah.
Misogyny, or I mean, don't forget he used to defend the border. I mean, he has changed his position, but his immigration policies were extremely backward and like kind of like aligned with Pat Buchanan's
or Tucker Carlson's
just a few years ago. And he did reverse, like, I will give him credit for that. I mean, listen, it's everybody has choices to make in life, right? Where are you putting your energy? If you're putting all of your energy into defending some like really weird people that align with the right or are the right over women, over people of color, over basic democratic values that like that sets us apart from, even with all of our problems in this country, sets us apart from the majority of Western countries, then, what are you doing in life?
Yeah, I mean, I see the logic, I guess, behind the argument that you defend, for instance, the Nazis' right to free speech. But I also think there's a problem if the face of free speech becomes Nazis and not like the left that is very regularly censored itself. And like even my mom understands free speech as a shorthand for secret white supremacy now. And that's not from me even telling her. That's just like, I'm amazed that understanding is bad to me, because I'm somebody who also likes free speech. Like when I went to London as to study abroad in college, I wanted to intern at the Index on Censorship. Like that was where I was at. And I think it sucks that Nazis are the face of free speech. And I think something should be done to address that.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chris. Sorry if we talked at you a little bit, but we obviously feel. Well, I at least feel the same way as you.
I expected nothing less. That's the whole point of your job, is to talk at us. So.
Thanks, Chris. Now, Chris, you're responsible for all the trolling we get now. You understand that, right?
I accept no such responsibility.
Okay.
Have a good one, man. Thank you.
Have a good day, you guys.
Bye. All right, let's take another call. Calling from an 859 number.
Hello, this is Corey from Maryland.
Corey from Maryland, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I came across an interesting article, and you might be interested in this.
Sure.
So, I'm assuming we all here are familiar with some of the major game companies and their toxic behaviors, especially when it comes to unionization efforts from game developers. So Activision Blizzard just made an unusual announcement. They have taken on former Donald Trump administrative member Brian Buatow to work at Activision Blizzard. This came direct from Bobby Kotick, who is also extremely problematic within the gaming industry for other reasons. But I find it extremely interesting that Kotick would hire somebody who it was reported was called the attack dog of Mike Pompeo, who, as it's been reported many times, was his longtime friend, a business partner, and both attended West Point.
I'm looking at the article now. Buatow is a former Undersecretary of State for Management at the U.S. Department of State for former President Donald Trump. Before his role with the Trump administration, he was a leading official in the CIA.
Yes. He's also was also testified against him in June by I think the article mentions General Steve Linick. It was Inspector General Linick for tried to bully him during his investigation into I think it was the Saudi arms sale. It was like over $8 billion to the Saudis in an arms sale. I think I'm not sure how much you guys follow the gaming industry.
Not at all.
It is interesting, and I think you all
Wrong day.
Matt might know.
It's interesting scenarios where it's become more and more articles are coming out of just the toxicity that has existed within the gaming industry itself. More and more CEOs and developers are coming under the gun and they're getting under the spotlight for horrific business practices. Riot just had a massive issue regarding sexual harassment problems and toxic behaviors. And just to see someone like Bobby Kotick hire this person and be like, this person is going to be great for us because he has government experience and he's a vet. It's like, well, you can what does that have anything to do in a video game industry, even one that's overseeing a nonprofit endowment run by Activision Blizzard?
Isn't some of that because these gaming industries are intertwined with national security now? Like all of the, ultimately we've evolved past entertainment to really, it's like what data can we pull, how can we monitor, whatever. I mean, I don't game, so I have no idea how sophisticated the technology has become, but I assume that there's a lot of information in there. And not to mention training people to be desensitized to drop bombs so they can join the military and do the same thing with drones.
Yeah, there's a clip of Reagan talking about especially that. As far as go ahead, caller.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I want you were talking about the industry a little bit more though, like the work conditions.
Yeah, so the work conditions are horrific. One of the ones you should look into, which was highly talked about for a while, has been was CD Projekt Red. They released 2077 last year, and the reports on that are horrific. And it's not just with CD Projekt Red. If you just Google video game developers overworked, you'll find that the conditions that these developers are coming under is absolutely horrendous. These are work conditions that you would not even expect from anybody in any industry. People are sleeping at desk. I believe BioWare came under fire because people would leave their desk during development cycles to go cry because of how much stress they're under. There is something called crunch. It is basically where developers are told that they don't have to, but if they don't complete their assignments, then they let everybody down. And all of that is always said with that hint, wink, wink of, yeah, you're going to stay here until it's done. People have been reportedly working up to 100 hours a week, people sleeping at desks, unable to go home. And a lot of the time, once development cycles end, these people are fired because they are no longer needed and they don't really receive any real major benefits. Another big issue was Activision Blizzard is about to fire or already fired a bunch of people. And one of the, I can't even put into words how messed up this is. As part of their severance, we're given $200 gift cards to the Blizzard store. And Bobby Kotick, meanwhile, is going to pocket a couple $1 million
Are you kidding me?
because of profits. Of overall profits, and it's just incredibly toxic. And just to see this article about Bellato is just a crack cherry on top of a sundae built out of crap. It's ridiculous how this is managing to go on.
A crap cherry on top of a crap sundae sounds delicious.
Do you know if there's number one, if there is craps chocolate syrup, and second, what state that most of these companies are based in?
So most of these companies, I can't really tell you off the back. A lot of these game developers, so they're usually studios that have been either acquired by some of the bigger companies or have been established for a while, and some of the more independent ones kind of keep to themselves. A great game by all accounts, and one that reportedly had great game conditions to work for was the developers of Hades, which was, I believe, by Supergiant. I suppose, by all accounts, that one was developed okay. I can't guarantee that for sure. But
the game was great.
All over the world. Yeah, game was great though. But they're all spread out. I mean, you'll also find issues if For instance, one of the ones that's been breaking into it a lot, Tencent Gaming, is a major Chinese company that has been dipping its toes into and buying up percentages of U.S.-based companies. It's just bad all over, and I do not know how this is going to get resolved. There should definitely be a game developers union where everybody from like the developers, the artists, voice actors, Q&A testers should just finally get unionization and get repped. These work conditions are horrendous, and then you see stuff like, again, Bobby Kotick going to pocket millions of dollars, hires these people who have been reportedly extremely toxic in their own rights. It's disheartening.
That's a strategy. I mean, like, go with the people that know how to do it. If anybody's a gamer, and it depends on what state you're in, it's very easy to like research what union. I mean, I naturally go to CWA. It depends on what like Communication Workers of America, what part of the gaming world you're in and what state you're in. But if that union has a strong presence there. But if you are working in gaming and you want to unionize, it's extremely easy to find information on how to unionize. And you can reach out to your local CWA, or maybe there's another union, and you can talk to somebody in the union and they will work you through the process. It's long, it's not easy, but just public service announcement. If you or anyone you know who works in these spaces, it's very, very doable.
Appreciate the call, Corey. Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
Great information. That's horrifying.
Yeah, let me just read some IMs because we're getting a bunch about just this very topic. Militant Apathy writes, y'all better ask Sam what happens when you laugh off gaming stuff. I don't know what that means. But then also writes, 20% of the Trump administration was wrapped up in Gamergate. Now, Devil's Bargain's a great book on how Steve Bannon basically, saw an opportunity with young white male angry gamers in order to tap into what we're seeing now with the alt-right. Fascinating dynamic there, and also can be very...
And related, Emma, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit on the show. It built the infrastructure for the space that we're in right now, YouTube. Like, there's a lot of overlap, at least in the beginning stages, and the way that the algorithms were built. And I forgot the name of the woman, and she's amazing, who was hired by Google to address the algorithmic issues in terms of like, all of, everything was being built by white men. And then, oh, what a shock. Like, everything is about, is geared towards white men who are a little bit more conservative. And so the algorithms are racist and sexist and misogynist. And as soon as she was hired to address these things, she was fired. And so now she has a big lawsuit. It's amazing. If you don't know about her, she's incredible. I'll find her name right now.
Yeah, I don't fully know that story, but yeah, that sounds fascinating.
The ignore gamer thing is a reference to Sam thinking Binder was wasting his time covering Gamergate all those years, and then it ended up winning the 2016 election.
I knew that. Yeah. So someone said, Cameron Avesque Davis says, regarding the gaming industry, it's all terribleness. The YouTube Jim Sterling has been following the industry for a long, long time and releases a weekly video in their series, The Jimquisition. Highly informative, infuriating, and entertaining videos. Cap No Fun says he was a Mike Pompeo flunky, referring to the new Activision Blizzard CEO. So,
oof.
Or
which is to say, like Koch brothers.
Yeah.
Timnit Guru is her name. Timnit Guru.
Timnit Guru.
Yes. Gebru. Excuse me. Gebru.
Gotcha.
I just got my eyes updated, and I don't have my new glasses yet.
I just got mine. It's the only way I can read IMs on the monitor from this distance. Train Boy says the personal automobile and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. So you and Train Boy Matt, is that you writing into the show?
Oh no, Train Boy is out there. He's a real person.
Yes. Well, it's yeah.
It's a real Train Boy. I've signed an autograph for Train Boy before.
Oh, hell yeah. All right, let's get into some clips then. I believe we have some... Okay, you want to get into the Schumer clip, Matt?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so Chuck Schumer is remaining afraid of a primary challenge in the coming 2022 election, and he continues to keep the heat on Joe Biden in regards to student loan debt. Now, there's a lot of complex dynamics here, but let's listen to Chuck Schumer alongside Elizabeth Warren And I believe was that Menendez talking about their desire for the public to basically pressure Joe Biden into canceling $50,000 of student loan debt.
So people, folks listening, whether you have the debt, have a friend who has the debt, believe it's the right thing, we're asking you, email, call, write President Joseph Robinette Biden and tell him you want this done. We're trying to get as many people to contact the White House as possible. And frankly, we told this to Joe Biden and he said, go ahead, let it rip. So let's show him what kind of support there is out there for this great plan that Elizabeth, Bob, and I, and many, many others are pushing. Let's get this done.
Oh, yikes.
Oh, my God.
That is Menendez there. I am just fascinated by everything there. So Schumer's trying to pressure Biden by making it seem like he's not pressuring Biden by saying, yeah, he told me to ask the public to let it rip, but so we can hear all the personal stories about student loan debt crippling people. Joe, you don't already know that? And then secondly, I mean, I don't know how this is going to affect anything because Biden's already basically made his decision that he's not going to cancel $50,000 of student loan debt. So what is it going to have to take? A piece of legislation through Congress? That's not getting past the filibuster. The only way it's going to happen is through an executive order. And I don't know how many letters from the public are going to change that. But just thoughts.
Yeah. Like, I just don't know. Why don't they do something? Right? Like, this is like, I don't know. Maybe you should raise a stink about it. Like maybe Joe Manchin has shown that senators can do to get a priority taken seriously. Like it's kind of insulting, I gotta say, or really insulting, depending on your view of this. That this part of the political process, which we all agree is an important one, that you need to push your representatives, is like being made a sort of like charade. Like Warren Lear saying, push, like that's not what it looks like. So what they're asking for is like, I don't know. It almost seems like an email, a play for email.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things you guys hit on it. First off, I don't think Schumer is afraid of a primary. I think what he's doing is just is showing his power. You know, he's the leader. I really don't think. I mean, Schumer. I don't think AOC is going to primary him. I don't think it's such a risk for her. I think we need to get that out of our minds. Schumer doesn't care about a primary. He's not getting primaried. It is, maybe he is. I shouldn't say that. Maybe he is getting primaried, but it's not by AOC. Schumer has it is about power. It is about weighing in on your power, showing that you're on the right side of history. But the reality is Schumer knows very well it's not going to happen, right? If it were to happen, as Matt just said, he would be, I don't know, the leader of the Senate and like hold Manchin and Sinema and like use the power that it's all about a perception of power, but not actualizing power. And in the meantime, it also sucks up space from other issues like the filibuster or things that could be on the table right now that are priorities to most Americans. It's using up energy on issues that they know are going to raise money, get people riled up. Maybe eventually there's a conversation in 10 years about eliminating student debt. And this is the beginning of it, the way that Fight for 15 started 10 years ago. And we're still sitting here discussing the Fight for 15. But this is like, basically, this is the worst form of democratic politics you can imagine. Pretending to lean left, but not actually leaning left and not actually using the power you have to do these things.
So maybe I have a bit more of a generous take than you here, just because what can he do, right? They've drafted legislation, him and Warren, but yes, he hasn't pushed for it in any real way because he knows he doesn't have the votes and Schumer doesn't seem interested in whipping votes. So he sees his only real route to getting something done on this by pressuring Biden. But he's doing it in such a ridiculous, convoluted way, as Matt said, getting people to write in and show their support. Like, dude, you're the Senate majority leader. How many times did Mitch McConnell bitch slap Donald Trump and basically try and get his way? Okay, maybe not in the public, but he exerted his muscle behind the scenes on a regular basis. That's what bothers me more about this. I actually do think that Schumer would be happy to cancel $50,000 of student loan debt, but he's not doing politics in the strong way.
And he knows how to do it. And I think that's the key. So okay, great. Schumer, you want us to pressure around student loan debt? We're pressuring you. Do your effing job. You are the leader of the Senate. You have been in office since you were in your 30s. You're part of the New York machine. You ousted a New York machine. You know how the levers of power work. I was your intern when I was 16 years old. I know how effective you are. Go do your effing job and put pressure on Manchin, put pressure on Sinema to end the filibuster, and go put pressure on the president. You want us to put pressure on you? Write letters to Chuck Schumer and say, do your effing job.
Yeah, that's the thing. You either put the pressure on Biden, Chuck Schumer. You either do that, or you put the pressure and whip the votes from Manchin and Sinema. That's really all you've got. And then see if you can get this done through reconciliation and see if it pertains to the budget. That's it. Those are the only two options, because no matter how many letters are written to Joe Biden, it's not going to change a thing.
I'm especially mad about this day because I spent 2 hours this morning dealing with my student loans. So do your effing job.
It is such a political gimme for Joe Biden to cancel student loan debt, and he just refuses to do it. It's this insane commitment to as a disciplinary tool.
How about everybody send copies of their student loans, how much you're paying every month, instead of your rent, instead of your paying for food, instead of your childcare, instead of your basic necessities. Why don't you send what you're spending to Manchin, Sinema, Biden, Harris, who wants to be president, and of course to Senator Chuck Schumer, and to Elizabeth Warren. Hey, you're partnering up with Elizabeth Warren and Menendez, Elizabeth Warren. Why don't you pressure Chuck Schumer to do his effing job?
Yeah. Chuck Schumer does not seem to want to whip votes. He wants to hold things in consensus, but he has no interest in twisting arms.
Honestly, he had the same sort of affect as he does when he does this thing Sam makes fun of him for, gimmicks in front of gas stations or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is about $50,000 of student loan debt for people who are a massive, massive societal problem. Take it be a little bit more urgent about it. It's not like.
This isn't about bath salts. He did this big thing for 3 months about bath salts. He's like, and the bath salts are really, they're a hindrance on society. They're ruining New York. We have to prioritize banning bath salts.
Sorry, I'm just reading some of these IMs. Schumer picks Sinema. This is a facade. He got lucky with that one. Male jocks are better than male gamers, says Fabucat58. Interesting take.
Male jock gamers are the best.
Yes. COINTELPROL says the personal automobile is not the problem. The problem is the capitalist enterprises that have been hawking them and undermining public transit programs for a century. That's a good point. The same applies.
I think there's a politics sort of embedded in the idea of sprawling suburbs and things like that. And I think that's why the American government has been so helpful to the auto industry.
It's born out of much of the first half of 20th century politics. Let's take another call. Calling from an 818 number.
Hello, can you hear me?
Dave from Jamaica. Knew it was you. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How's the crew doing? How are you doing, Noe?
Fabulous. How are you?
I'm Matt. I'm doing fine. I guess this is not so much of a critique of Chris, because I like Chris. It's more of the how people engage with independent media, right?
Right.
We shouldn't be viewing it as kind of like a binary, right? Glenn Greenwald has done good stuff, and he seems to be a bit of a jerk, right? So people have to kind of balance those things. You kind of have to look on it like less of him as your friend and more of him as a kind of a tool, right? Well, what he did in Brazil was very useful and good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what people should, in other words, when he's not being useful, then you shouldn't. You shouldn't be as torn up about it, because when he's not being useful, when he's bad, say he's bad, right? But just I don't understand, at least with certain folks on the left, the need to kind of defend somebody because they have done past good work, if you know what I mean. If they're not useful to the cause, it's kind of the personalization. Am I making sense? Or?
Yeah, no, I think you're making sense. It's hard to depersonalize for a lot of people in a media personality-based space, but I agree. And I think people do struggle to look at arguments on their merits sometimes, even myself, especially when, you know, it becomes personal. It becomes personal. It's literally like we're being personally attacked. So that's
exactly
right.
No, but as I'm looking on it, it's more like with the need the need for people to kind of personalize media figures that they don't know personally. So not with your cases because you're being attacked personally, but for people who don't know Glenn to be as affected is kind of strange. Now, as I said, I think Glenn, as his behavior now, he's more of a useful tool to the right, right? So I've been hearing arguments from people on the left, like I think what's his name, Zero Books, said stuff like we should love Glenn Greenwald because of his contrarian and that's intellectually stimulating. I find that a bizarre argument to make. So that's what I'm saying. I think people need to kind of step away from that type of thing. In other words, he's not being useful now. So, and as Nomi was saying, it's kind of, to be honest, it's kind of a financial motive going on, right? People are doing various branding exercises. Yeah. So when people are talking crap, you don't reward it. So if he's talking crap with the trans stuff and all of that, don't reward it with engagement at all because that's kind of the goal. It's obviously the goal. Like when he went on the Daily Wire and said, "Whoever is a socialist," that had a specific goal in mind. That wasn't intellectually stimulation, right? It was to get clicks. So don't reward goofy behavior.
And I'm not gonna reward it by well, I'm gonna hang up on you here, Dave, because just and Nomi,
Thanks, Dave.
You can weigh in, but yeah,
No
thanks,
problem.
Dave. Yeah, I just don't want to talk about it anymore. But like, very good points by Dave as always.
Yeah, I think listen, I mean, aside for him or whatever, maybe just for the broader audience, like in campaigns, like there's obviously you'll get attacked in a campaign and you have to choose when you respond and when you don't respond, when your followers respond, when your allies respond on your behalf, because there's always a risk of expanding the controversy, expanding the narrative because it feeds the other side. And so, I just think that it's about a lot of these people staying in conversation and trying to continue to create wedges and eyes on the prize. We've got a lot of big things on our plates right now, and every second we put into these petty debates online over who knows what, and like I think we've already made it very clear and I think we've already, in the ways that we can, informed folks enough or highlighted or shined a light on aspects of these people that those who are paying attention are already aware of it and they've made their decision. And so now we've got an Amazon fight today, vote happening. We have all these key issues, and every second we're putting into these people,
yes,
time we're not putting into really critical fights right now.
So no more frankly calls on that.
Yeah.
No offense, Dave, and the first caller, but that's it. 2 strikes, and that's the strikeout for that. So the baseball hasn't started yet.
We'll give whoever was calling about that a chance to think of something different, and let's do a few.
Be like a Wendy Williams for media, like someone who could just handle all those kinds of calls. Like somebody start a show and you just take all those calls all day long and you talk about the drama between this person and that person and who's doing what to whom. You just do that show.
It to an extent, but then there's I guess again, this thing just makes me more sad than anything. It's just like it's a bummer. So we're gonna now have fun though with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene continues her QAnon service, or she does serve the god of Q, and then I guess this secondarily, which seems sacrilegious, but I digress. She is pushing this talking point about how Biden's going to require a vaccine passport for you to even move about society, and that there's communism involved, but also fascism. She can't seem to tell the difference. Let's take a listen.
They want you to be required to have something called a COVID passport, and this would mandate your ability to be able to travel, your ability to be able to go to events, your ability to be able to buy and sell. And I asked the question earlier today, is this something like Biden's mark of the beast? Because that is really disturbing and not good. Oh, if you're going to come into the football game or the baseball game or the concert, you need your vaccine passport because we're trying to do a good job to keep everyone safe. This is what the Biden administration is trying to talk to these private companies into doing. Well, let's analyze that. You see, it's still the same thing. It's still fascism or communism, whatever you want to call it, but it's coming from private companies. So I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism.
All right, Alex, you're always got.
The actual term for that is fascism, when corporations are involved in high levels of government, basically, and it becomes this monolith. Also, the mark of the beast thing, that's a biblical term for during the end times, basically, when there's the whole battle for humanity, that everybody's going to get a mark on their foreheads that the devil basically bestows on you to say if you're a slave or if you're a part of the, I don't even know whatever the fuck the Bible says. It's all nonsense. But that's, I think they initially said the mark of the beast would be done by Bill Gates via vaccinations, but now she's got to turn to Joe Biden to do it.
This is hysterical. I mean, like, first it's masks. So they just have to find their enemy. Like, how are they trying to control us with this? God forbid you have a piece of paper. They want us safe. I mean, she even says it in her commentary. They're focused on us being safe. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Also, I would love her to define corporate communism.
I love that. I want that tattooed on my arm.
Well, that's because like fascism, like a lot of people in her fan base don't have necessarily a problem with that. I also, Vincent Bevins, who wrote the Jakarta Method, had this tweet, which I think is this is the proper context. Because Justin Amash also said, no vaccine passport, it doesn't get much more dystopian than being required to show your, quote, health papers wherever you go. Vincent Bevins says, a more terrifying scenario would be that your movement around the world is restricted simply by your place of birth.
Oh, yeah. What's her stance on migrants having to show papers at the border? That's almost like a mark of the Latin American beast.
You know what? Voter ID is the mark of the beast.
There you go.
Right.
Corporate communism.
Somehow it's corporate communism. What would that be, Marjorie Taylor Greene? And I love how she has to look at her paper for Mark of the Beast. Doesn't she have her QAnon talking points down by this point?
No, she's too busy doing CrossFit to study.
I'm at the gyms that she says are closed in DC, but are actually open. All right, now we will take another call based on that.
Don't they have like brain oil? Like when you're in CrossFit, and I know I'm probably offending a ton of people. Don't you have to take all this brain oil stuff? Isn't that part of it? Like they all these like Joe Rogan-esque products, and they just drink the brain oils, and it's supposed to make you smarter.
I feel like, yeah, that's just endemic to a lot of gym culture.
Yeah. What is brain oil? Like,
I'm a yogi. We meditate.
I
fracking fluid for your cortex.
I did yoga before the pandemic, and now I don't because it's like I really have a hard time being present by myself, which is a bad thing. But I need to do yoga, with just those instructional videos. I do just regular workouts now, but I think it's affecting my mind. It's just so.
You want to do group yoga? I'm happy to we could set up a time. We could partner up.
I'd be down to practice first before I do it because I don't want to embarrass myself if you're.
It's not yoga's not about embarrassment.
Well, that's my own insecurity. So talking.
Matt, you can join us too.
Matt, yeah. Would you be down?
I'm not super flexible, but we'll see.
No one is. That's why you do yoga.
I'm especially not. Even like when I was playing sports in high school, I couldn't touch my toes. Is unbelievable.
I have really bad hamstrings. I've been doing yoga for like 17 years and can do crazy poses, but I still can't bend over and touch my toes. Like I barely can. It's just what happens. I'm sure Sam is really loving how we're hosting the show right now, guys. This is what happens when you get us.
I mean, Sam, we should do that on the Majority Report Twitch channel. Let's get Sam on the yoga pad because that would be pretty fun.
Would be.
Yes. Make it a subscription drive.
Calling from a 406 number. Calling from a 406 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Lucas from Montana.
Lucas from Montana. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing well.
But first off, I just want to say, Matt, if you want to get flexible, you should do yoga. Again, before the pandemic, used to do a lot more yoga. I'm sort of in the same boat of like I just got back into running.
Yeah.
So, but
I actually have a mat, and me and my girlfriend have been doing Peloton lessons. For the last few months.
Did you make her do that? Did you give her that gift for Christmas?
No, wait, what? No, I didn't. I got a yoga mat for myself. She got her own yoga mat.
The Peloton. It was.
Oh, that's hers too. Yeah, I don't even know. You have to pay for that?
Okay, so there was a commercial that came out over the holidays where a boyfriend or a partner or husband got his wife a Peloton bike, and it caused all this outrage. And like the actress who played that wife ended up doing like another commercial, kind of mocking, because it's like, why would your husband get you a Peloton? Like, what, am I fat or like? You see what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah. No, I didn't do that. I didn't subscribe to Peloton for her.
But Lucas, what you calling about other than, you're connecting with us on, at least me, on not doing yoga right now?
I'm always unsure about what to talk about because you always, like, with all the clips and everything, like with the Marjorie Taylor Greene, it was amusing how she basically was calling it fascism and then sort of realized, oh, that's my team. I got to call it something else.
Yeah.
But the thing I really wanted to talk about was something that was brought up a number of weeks ago, but about the right to work laws.
Mm-hmm.
So, like here in Montana, I remember like back during when the 2010 census was happening, like in 2009, and it may have been before that, but that was when it first registered with me, the whole Tea Party movement and right to work, that Alec and the Koch brothers were astroturfing at the time. And it was like really pervasive then. And it just is sort of sadly amusing how like all of these states' rights advocates, they actually, like, Montana law was actually overturned by Citizens United as part of this thing to promote dark money and the right to work laws in Montana.
Interesting.
Because like during with the Copper Kings, like in Butte and that area, they used to basically control the elections. It's like you'd had to vote a certain way on threat of like being fired by the Copper Kings.
Right.
And so Montana actually instituted a bunch of laws that said no, corporations are not allowed to interfere in elections at all. Like they're not allowed to contribute money. They're not allowed to do any of that stuff. And then Citizens United comes along and says, "Oh yeah, it's." And so I over the years I've watched the dark money flood more and more into Montana, and it was sort of amusing at first because like their attacks were sort of ridiculous, like. There was this whole campaign about how millions of Montanans oppose John Tester.
There's not 1 million Montanans, is your point.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's like, where are all these Montanans? But,
Yeah.
and the ads have been getting a
Montana diaspora.
to the point where we are actually, Montana is actually effectively being like all three of our Republican representatives are originally from out of state.
Yeah, it seems like a test case in what we see a lot throughout the country, which is just targeted conservative action in areas that would be most susceptible to flooding of money, less populated, and they're doing the same with state legislatures as well.
Yeah, and that's been Alex modus operandi for decades now, to the point where it's like you'd have Republican legislators say, like, present bills, and like they'd say, "Oh, did you write this bill yourself?" And they're like, "Well, what are you implying? Of course I did." It's like, why does it have Alec letterhead?
Right.
And
well, I appreciate the call, Lucas, because, you know, just getting your insight being from Montana on that dynamic is fascinating. Have a good one, all right?
You as well.
Thanks. I will take one more. This will probably be our final call of the day. Calling from a 989 number. Calling from a 989 number.
Hey, is this me?
Yes, this is you. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
All right. This is another Chris for the show, calling from Michigan.
Chris from Michigan.
I've been trying to get through for a while, and then most of the time it takes so long that the issues that I want to talk about change. But one of the main overriding things that comes up a lot is communication. And I can't count how many times we get people calling in or messaging in asking for advice on, you know, how do you talk to this group of people about this, or how do you get someone to understand the point of this? And I feel like it's very difficult for a lot of us because we tend to find our position on issues based on facts and understanding. And when we're trying to change people's mind, you have to take, you're more likely to succeed going after emotions and trying to get around emotional roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, last week, either there was a IM or a call, and I had IM'd about it before, about a YouTuber, the Bo of the Fifth Column. Now, he's not really the type that, like, would be beneficial to have on the show, I don't think, and he says that himself. He's not really, you know, he's more of a commentator or like an explainer, but he's one that is extremely good at really encapsulating an issue in a way that people can understand and approaching it in a way that disarms someone who, you know, if you're trying to argue with someone about whether or not food stamps should be expanded or cut, you know, if you come right at it and tell someone they're wrong, they're gonna immediately be oppositional and defiant.
Yeah.
And it's better to. So I would just strongly.
But how do I
encourage
get
people
that
to look him
emotional
up.
release for myself, Chris? I love telling people that they're wrong.
That'll just have to be when people call in about gun Greenwalds and stuff.
Yeah, I think I'll
Prevent
probably
that
have
way.
to just join a fight club or something like that.
Yeah, but yeah, I just really encourage people to look him up, and you know, for you guys to watch him when you can, to maybe get ideas for how to explain issues to people. Yeah, I don't know.
It's basic. It's like basic organizing principles. I mean, there's this like thing that's happening a lot right now where, you know, we're incentivized as a culture, as a society, to just like throw everything we dislike about somebody or say something's wrong. And even when it's our allies, when we should be speaking to our allies in different ways, and we should be speaking to people we want to move in different ways, meeting them where they are. Like, how can we start where we are? What do we agree on? And then like build out from there. But like issuing a set of demands or, you know, yelling at whoever you're trying to move ain't gonna work. Would you respond that well to that?
Right, exactly. And he, I guess one good example that he's been doing recently, because like you said, with the community, with the organizing thing, like he's big into community organizing, so that's probably where some of this fits in. But like when discussing the housing of migrants and stuff, he goes into facts about like how much it costs per day just to house these people and how much we're wasting. So like if someone is somehow thinking it's okay to do what we're doing, and you don't think you can get it, change their mind on the facts of what we're doing, you approach it from the monetary aspect of it. Because these are the same people that think that we can't have immigrants come in because they're going to use all the resources, and we're paying $800 a day for every adolescent or child or whatnot to $800 a day to keep in those facilities. But yeah, I don't know, I'm just rambling now. But
no,
but
these were all
check
great
him out,
points.
And I encourage the audience and encourage you guys to look him up. He's blown up pretty fast. He's a pretty useful tool for the movement, I think.
Can you say it again? Name of the channel?
It's Beau, Beau.
Like my grandma's deceased dog. Yes, both deceased.
I think his name is Justin King. He's an independent journalist, but his main thing is the channel now. So, and they do like fundraisers and stuff for women's shelters and that kind of stuff. They do a lot of good work.
Appreciate it, Beau, and thank you, Chris from Michigan. Have a good one.
Yep. Take it easy, guys.
Bye. All right, guys, that was our final call. I know we have a lot of people waiting, but I'm sorry you're about to hear the sad noise. Sad noise. Now we're gonna get into one more clip, read some IMs, then we'll head out of there. Of there, I mean here. That's what I mean. There we go. Stuart Varney had some interesting commentary on Bernie Sanders choosing to stand with Amazon workers. He had a suggestion for Jeff Bezos. Let's take a listen. Beep, boop, 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 boop. Oh, I haven't even used the soundboard today. This is a really good opportunity.
Sorry, here it is right now.
Damn it! Go on.
Something about the Washington Post. I just think that maybe Mr. Bezos should do something about the Washington Post, which he owns, lock, stock, and barrel, which vigorously supports.
However, as you know, that is separate from Amazon. That is a private investment by Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, no. He's got control of the Washington Post. If he doesn't like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, make a change in your editorial policy at the Washington Post, for heaven's sake.
So you're saying use the Washington Post.
I would just say go look at the headlines about Bernie Sanders from the campaigns. That happened.
Yeah.
Student Varney doesn't actually read the Washington Post. He only reads the Wall Street Journal and New York Post.
Right.
Policy at the Washington Post, for heaven's sake.
So you're saying use the Washington Post to go after Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren if you want more pointed.
Why not? Why is the Washington Post the most outrageous leftist organization in America, with a few other exceptions?
Yeah,
and it's owned by Bezos, who's with Bernie Sanders having a go at him.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah.
Take the gloves
Utilize
off.
all levers.
Get
I see
on
your
with
point.
Levers, guys, levers.
He strong-armed her into agreeing with him, even though she was trying her best to pretend to be.
Sorry, producer? Okay, yes, I'll agree with him. Thank you. I now know who advertises for our show.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things there. Why not? It's just because that's completely unethical, but that would be foreign to Stuart Varney, who engages in unethical media practices on a daily basis. Yeah, Bezos already engaged in that. He just did a little bit more subtly during the primary. Now,
I mean, a practical answer to why not is it would cause a minor revolt. I mean, I'm sure there'd be plenty of Washington Post people up for that. I mean, if you look at the way Glenn Kessler fact checks Bernie Sanders, for instance, but you can't. I don't think the capitalist owner of media can go in and just force all the journalists to attack a person. Like it can't be that overt. This is done through the hiring decisions, basically.
You need like an Elizabeth Brunig with every Barry Weiss, just to make people feel better.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's a long history. I mean, Stuart Varney is so insulated and old that he remembers the days when like Life magazine was very directed, or when Time magazine was very directed and owned by oligarchs who had an agenda and who were married to people like running for president or vice president or whatever she was running for.
Like the Luce family.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm referring to. So I mean, there's a long history of this, and also like this. Let's just be clear: this idea of I don't have to say this to us, but the idea of nonpartisan journalism is a marketing tool. It was a marketing tool invented, like I think in the late 1800s by New York Times. It's not. Yes, there are many institutions that are trying their best to have balance and fact checking and use, a journalistic process, the elements of journalism, some basic, but for the most part, it's always been what it is, and he's just saying it out loud.
Yeah, I mean, there's this religion within traditional journalism in places like the Washington Post and the New York Times where they can't even like tweet something that might have some political perspective that's embedded in the fifth layer of it. You guys might hear those sirens. But they all have political leanings. They just try to pretend like they don't influence their reporting. And that doesn't take away from the fact that New York Times, Washington Post, I believe the reason we should be critical of when, for example, the Washington Post went after Bernie Sanders so ridiculously in both primaries is because there's an important place for media that has the resources to do deep dives and investigative work, say what we saw with, when the Washington Post was able to aggregate all of those Cuomo accusers, for example, that was important stuff. And not all of these independent papers have the resources to do so, which is why you should try to make sure that the situation doesn't happen where Jeff Bezos can own a Washington Post, etc. But I digress. So you take things as they come. But there's so many different layers to this. The fact that Stuart Varney said that the Washington Post is a left-wing newspaper, as crazy lefty as it gets, I would love if he tuned in to some of our YouTube shows, by the way. Secondly, the fact that he didn't pay attention to the fact that the Washington Post was so against Bernie Sanders during the primary is he...
Not enough. Not enough.
Call him a communist and... copy and paste Fidel Castro's head onto Bernie's body for cover stories. And then thirdly, the fact that he thinks that this is acceptable behavior. Why not? Why not?
Well, and this is a financial show too, remember? So who has been killing journalism? It's bad enough that in 2008, there was a major media collapse dealing, everything from the economic collapse to technology and how the media landscape shifted. So 85 to 90% of newspapers across the country shuttered. First cutting investigative reporters, then cutting State House reporters, and then just shuttering entirely. And then the remaining ones that do survive are bought up by hedge funders. So it is intertwined with the world that he's representing on these financial shows. They just don't see anything wrong with it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They're all part of the same reactionary structure as Bezos and Varney. The framing of the Washington Post as liberal is exceedingly galling, particularly in times when the COVID stimulus is brought up or student loan relief is, because then Mitch McConnell can go and point to say, hey, look at these wacko lefties. Even they say that we're going too far with $2,000 checks or whatever like that. And it's unbearable to me because you actually go and look at the editorial board, and it is I'm not joking, 9 out of 10 are Ivy League graduates on that thing, maybe 8 out of 10 if I'm being generous, but it's seriously that skewed in terms of class. So yeah, it's there. I think Washington Post doesn't mind when Varney does that, and Varney's doing because Varney's doing them a solid, and it's all to sort of narrow the aperture of what's acceptable.
Yes, and the readership of these papers, which is so interesting. I remember reading a statistic a few months back that something like New York Times, Washington Post readers, it's 80 to 90% identify as liberal or Democratic, right? So what the right is consuming is all partisan media. And what the left or the Democratic Party is consuming is the media trying to appear nonpartisan, but actually oftentimes capitulating to the right wing in many ways that are disproportionate. So it creates this ridiculous ecosystem where a crazed right-winger like Stuart Varney can claim that the Washington Post, owned by the richest man in the world, is some lefty outlet, and yet the what's being presented is center right, or at least establishment propaganda in many ways. And so real leftist media has zero representation because the shadow of neoliberal media is being treated as leftist propaganda when it's obviously not that. So I digress.
Maybe we should protest Stuart Varney's house, and just drop a bunch of like Democratic left flyers. I don't know.
Oh, also, speaking of that, shout out to the folks who woke Marco Rubio up with mariachi music this morning.
Wait, I missed this. What?
Let's see. Take a few IMs and I'll pull this up.
Take a few IMs. That's a great way to wrap up our clips. Me and Pillow Guy. Mine Pillow Guy. That's what it says. That's funny. Remember when the Washington Post ran 16 negative stories on Bernie Sanders in 16 hours during the primary? I do. Married to Mothra says, I wonder if Stewart is related to Jim Varney. I don't know who Jim Varney is off the top of my head. Who is that? Jim Varney. American
That
actor.
sounds like a sports term.
I American actor. Comedian. Interesting.
Okay, fair enough.
Stuart Varney's British, so.
Yeah, I think Varney, it's not a rare last name. Hello Sam's Tushy says, do you guys have advice for starting a union in a company that is mostly temporary visa workers? Construction work, by the way.
I don't know if you can. I
don't know if you can.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Google is like really good at this.
Yeah, ask a union organizer.
I'm so sorry. I don't know, but I appreciate you guys writing in. I wish I could have a better answer for you. Craven Anarchist says, regarding the Activision Blizzard call, Jim Sterling, they them pronouns, does incredible journalistic work reporting on labor relations and other exploitative capitalistic tactics in the gaming industry on their YouTube channel. They'd also be an incredible guest for Casual Friday or any other day. Just saying, hashtag left is best. I really appreciate that. And former Ranger, this is just for me. Former Rangers legend Jack Johnson says, Emma, should the Rangers pick up Shane Gostisbehere off waivers to replace me? I think no. That was a GG. I'm not going to read that. I'm sorry, guys. Show Rap says, really good interview today. Please, more international and foreign policy interviews. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to become more educated myself. I was more educated on Israeli politics than I am on other countries, so it was a good interview for my purposes in that area. And just to hear just all the different factions and how much needs to be juggled in order for a coalition to be formed. I mean, really what's standing in the way of Netanyahu having his government is... it's very threadbare and can be very scary based on how Netanyahu is going to want to pass laws in order to protect himself from corruption trials. So, do you have that clip, Matt?
Yes. So Thomas Kennedy, of National Campaign Manager for United We Dream, shared this video this morning of people waking up Marco Rubio. Says, we brought mariachis to Marco Rubio's house this morning. It's a wake-up call for him to support legislation that includes a path to citizenship for immigrants. We won't allow him to hold our community hostage or spread false narratives about immigrants any longer. So... Sounds great.
I would love if someone did this every morning.
I know.
Wake me up.
This is like dangerously close to positive reinforcement, but...
Oh my God. Wait, so I lived in Mexico City briefly for a few months, and I was working from there, and like I would sit at cafes outside and I would get on conference calls, and as soon as I would get on a conference call, a mariachi band would show up and I would be like... Literally, I'd be like, yeah, the budget sounds great.
That'd be good for getting out of any like calls you want to like duck out of, is just have a stereo play a mariachi. Oh, there's a mariachi band just next door.
I love them. So I started like tipping them to go across the street and play, because I was like, I just need to finish this call, please.
All right, let's take a few more IMs and we will get out of here. It's 2:15. I thought it was later, but you know what? It's like the boss man's not here, so what are you gonna do? Prairie Fire Kowalski said, I noticed you didn't read all of my agricultural report yesterday. I will do better at making it more entertaining. I apologize for failing you, the left and the Republic. Kowalski, you know I adore you. I'm sorry for not reading that whole but honestly, I should just make the text bigger on here because it's a little hard to monitor. I have astigmatism, so it's hard for me to see things far away. pH Balance says, you guys are probably thinking of MCT oil. It's proven to help with brain function, and it's kind of a staple in the keto paleo community.
That's it.
Thinking of?
Yes.
Illuminati kids, are you being earnest when you say you don't know who Jim Varney is? Yes, I am being earnest. Stoneman says Jim Varney plays Ernest P. Worrell from the 80s series Ernest comedy movies. I was born in 1994. I don't know who.
Oh, I remember those Ernest movies.
I don't. Oh, Ernest goes to.
Don't.
Yeah, Ernest. Was there like an Ernest Halloween? I was very young, but.
Yeah, you're 80, right?
Yeah, they always like shot from like under his nostrils. I remember.
I'm old enough, but I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like I grew up with just one sister, and I missed like a lot of we weren't watching, you know, some of the more male-directed movies from those times. You know what I mean? No, I don't know if you.
I do. What was that?
You have a sibling?
I don't. I'm an only child. So they just like threw me out into the woods, and I like skipped stones and collected crickets and like brought animals into the house, and then there'd be like dead animal smells coming from wherever I put them.
Stone Man says, Emma, you're not missing anything. Okay, I appreciate it. And okay, this is the final IM of the day. Mark Von Wisco says, finally paid off my student loans in October 2020. Took out my first loan in fall of 1981. I'll be 58 next month. That is disgusting indictment of our system, but I'm going to give you a shofar even though you didn't ask for one.
Congratulations.
Because I'm drunk with power. Matt and Nomi, thanks so much. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today.
My show, 45 minutes. Yes.
Yes.
YouTube.com/The Show. Twitch.
I ended the show early because I'm thoughtful about Nomi preparing for her show. That's why I did it. Yeah. Yeah.
We have Chris Smalls on, so join us. We're going to talk about the Amazon vote. It's today. Really exciting. Go check it out. Thanks, Emma.
Go do it. Matt. All right. Thanks, guys.
Brendan.
See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.